Well, let's do this a little bit in Belgium, though, because I lived there twice and I feel comfortable in talking Flemish. Dames en heren, goeiedag. Mijn naam is Schroevers voor de Hogeschool van Amsterdam. Het is me een groot genoegen om met u te helpen om België beter te begrijpen. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Belgium, often referred to as the cockpit of Europe, and that is because of all the large concentrations of European Union, European Council, all kind of institutions that are predominantly in the larger Brussels metropolitan area. Gewest Brussel, hoofdstedelijk gewest Brussel, as it's called in Flemish. Like I said, I lived there twice. I often teach there, and yes, I do that in either Flemish or in French. Yeah, it's very nearby. Still, it's rather different for those of you who live in the Netherlands and know it is a cultural change, which again proves that language is only a minor part of our total human communication. If we look at the country code, it's 32 for phone, it's .be for the internet domains, and of course it's the same time zone. To fly to Brussels would be wasting a lot of money and polluting the nature we have on this earth, but it's really also not worth it. And most often you need to make stopovers in Germany. So I would say train, or if you even like car or bicycle, would even be doable. Is it rainy? Yeah, well, no more or no less than Amsterdam or London. It's 200 rainy days per year. It doesn't mean it rains the whole day. It just there is precipitation for a few moments that day. This is the Belgian license plate, and there's also a blue version that is for the Eurocrats who don't pay tax and can afford nice cars with the same one, but then in blue lines. It is a country that is partly below sea level, just like here in the North Netherlands, and then you see wonderful constructions like these. And size matters. It's not often that, as a Dutchman, I can say a country is smaller than mine, and therefore I want to take time to elaborate on this. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Belgium is 30,000 square kilometers only, whereas our huge country is 41,000 square kilometers. I always thought actually it was bigger, but it's not, to my surprise. But yeah, let's say we're both small. If we look at populations, there is a difference. And Netherlands, over the last 10 years or so, managed to have an enlargement of about 2 million, but Belgium stayed relatively the same, which is 11.5 million inhabitants. It is a country that scores really well. I don't know if you, of course, you're there as a tourist and you want to see Bruce, which you should actually. Although I personally care more about Ghent, which is because there's people living there and not just tourism. But also when I'm teaching there or when I'm staying there a little bit longer, then I used to live there in cities, but especially in the countryside, it's actually pretty organized and really well done and nice. So I think you have a nice life if you live in one of these smaller places. And the food is substantially better than here in the north. So yeah, why not? Give it a chance. And if you look at the international rankings and all these tables that we on a yearly basis try to show and share with the world, they're doing pretty well. They're usually top 10 with a lot of things. So it's interesting market, interesting place. But those 200 rainy days. This is the euro coin with the Belgian side and the European side. Initially, they also planned to do that with the banknotes. They wanted to have a national side and the European side, but so luckily they stopped that because that would be a disaster, I think. Let's go to the planet Belgium. If we use Google and we do some searches, Then you see things like, why do the Belgium speak French? Why do Belgian beers taste weird? It's also really, but why Belgium is a failed state or known as the cockpit of Europe? Well, I explained that. Um, it depends on which language, because if you do this in another language like Dutch or French, you see different things that people ask Google. Anyway, it's a useful tool. But to give you some quotes, I like the one from Charles de Gaulle. Belgium is a country invented by the British to annoy the French. Historically, it is somewhat truth, because they didn't want, after Napoleon was defeated, they didn't want um, France they didn't want the Netherlands to be very powerful. So they split it up a little bit. It was helped from elsewhere. And Audrey Hepburn says, "I'm half Dutch, half Irish, and I was born in Belgium. If I was a dog, I'd be in a hell of a mess." Charming. Let's look at an interesting part of this Dutch-Belgian border. And this really is what you have this a lot. You also see it in Switzerland and France and Italy. And there's these tiny little places that once were with certain dukes and then they married. And this is how, maps of regions and nations got born. But very funny still nowadays is Baarle-Nassau and Baarle-Hertog, which is around Baarle, obviously. It is one town, but actually it's a series of enclaves. What's an enclave? It's a pocket of land that is within the territory of another nation. And this is all kind of medieval land agreements, which until nowadays they stayed through treaties and other kind of things. So what does it look like? This. And it's actually the world's oldest enclaves. 1200s, that is pretty old. It's almost 1,000 years. And it is like that. But when COVID was there, and at a certain time, Belgium decided to close the borders for the Dutchies. I didn't take it. Forgive me, folks. But then it was really funny because this is actually the border in Baarle-Nassau. Sometimes it's just straight through houses. So the living room could be in Belgium and the restroom could be in the Netherlands. But when there was COVID, it was interesting because they split up some shops. That was interesting. This is the Théâtre Royal in Brussels. But what is maybe also interesting is they're having these huge portraits of a former king, Boudewijn Boudewijn, and his royal queen. The relationship that we see with royalty in Belgium is complex. There is particularly the more Flemish independentists. They don't like it at all, and as a result, we will see on a 3-monthly basis there is in the media a scandal, a problem, or something. And we often make fun about it, but it is actually a power game that is being exercised. The king originally came from Greece. They needed a king because there was a new country, and they said, well, let's get a king. And they got some count or duke from Greece, and that became the Belgian royalty. They didn't speak any Flemish until a long time, because French was a little bit more the elite language spoken at the time. So that they had with a thick accent. But there is a lot of people that don't really feel royal about it. There's also people that do. And sometimes I was living in Brussels on a day where royalty is celebrated in the Kingdom of Belgium. A lot of people would hang out the tricolored flag. And I realized that is more than I expected. So there is also support for the royal house, but not by everybody. So as a result, we get these kind of comic books, in this case, Philippe van België, Frituur Belgique, and they're making fun of the royal house and the king, etc., because they don't want to be in Belgium, they want to have a Flemish state. The flag, I use this one, but one of the true things that you would see abroad would be like Belgian chocolates, By the way, a Dutch invention, but I should say the majority of the market nowadays is correct in Belgian hands, Union, and some other larger factories. The harbor is still Amsterdam, actually. And yeah, beer would be definitely something that people would recognize as very, very Belgian. And they do really have very strong research and development and marketing and all kinds of special things with the beer. So yeah, maybe they deserve that honorable title. Here we see the beautiful city of, maybe you know it. It's Bruges, Brugge di Skone. It is really beautiful, although it is super fake touristic at this moment. It is, I don't know what happened to it. It's like a giant plastic surgery operation that the city had. When I was young, it was just so lovely and there were hardly any tourists. They were there, but limited. And now it is just massive. It's Disneyland. It's kind of over. But still, the city itself is lovely. You would really be a fool not to go there, especially if you're an exchange student. Go to Bruges. But also go to Ghent, because that's where people actually live, and make it a day trip to Bruges maybe. In Bruges, there is a beer producer, a beer factory that did a crowdfunding. And oh no, sorry. First, I'm messing up. But here we have His Excellency Monsieur de Kessel, who is the Bishop of Bruges. Is the gentleman with the microphone on the left side of the image. And what is he doing? He's blessing the new beer. This in the right corner, it's not Santa Claus, it's Saint Arnoldus, which is also the protector of beer, of beer brewers. You have to realize that water wasn't always drinkable in the old days, so people would trust beer, like you do nowadays. Some of us, so if you would, take care of your religious observances towards Saint Arnoldus, that would prevent beer fermentation failure and a sour taste in the beer. And basically you would spoil your income because it wouldn't be very sellable. But they still do that on a yearly basis. What's also interesting is where I wanted to talk about the Bruges brewery, the Halve Maan, the Half Moon. They did a crowdfunding to get an underground pipeline from the brewery to the bottling plant, but also to the pub in town. And the beer is traveling 3.2 kilometers in 3/4 of an hour, and your beer from the pump in the bar is coming straight from the factory. How about that? Pipelines under the city with beer. And that is always a relief on a warm, heavy day than just one glass, darling. Another classic would be what we wrongly call French fries. It's nothing French. I think even it's Canadian soldiers in the First World War that heard the French language and said, well, we're in France. But no, you were not. You were in the French-speaking part of Belgium. Slicely thin cut pieces of potato in hot oil, and there is a procedure on how to make the real Belgian French fries, Belgian fries. It is a classic. Here is the Belgian Minister of Health, Maggie de Blok, from the Open Flemish Liberals, Open VLD. She's very popular, and she likes good fries. She publicly agrees to that. What do they eat their fries with? If you are a Dutchie, you occasionally have taken your fries in the so-called frietkotten, which is a kind of car on wheels where they fry it, and they're always in public places. And it's actually an institution in Belgium, a frietkot. And that's I also saw them in schools universities of applied sciences, where they have them in the outside, and a long waiting line. But the question is, what is the sauces? Because I remember as a kid in Belgium, there is this enormous amount of sauces, and they ask you, "Wat wil je op je friet?" And I didn't know really how to answer, but there was so much, and I wanted to try them all. And so there's the sauce tartare, the andalouse, the samurai, and there's a whole series of names and chemicals that you can have on your fries. It seems that nowadays it's becoming more mayonnaise. They're getting civilized on that part. And the proof, the academic proof, would be from this quote. This is Henri Michel at the time, the federal prime minister of Belgium, and here he's being attacked by fries and he's sprayed with mayonnaise. But what I also you have to see, he is a Belgian. This is a sign he's a Belgian because he's smiling. He's smiling, although they're ruining his suit and they're putting 100 degrees potatoes on his hairy head. And what is now, he's now, at the moment when I record this video, he's very high in the European Commission. He would be, let's say, our president, or if you like, or you have the double function, but one is the German lady and the other one is him. But he actually studied in the Amsterdam University. I was so surprised. He's Walloon, French-speaking original, en hij spreekt een beetje Nederlands. If we look at the fries in the world and the market of fries, so anything you would eat at McDonald's or all these dreadful sad fast food chains, usually that comes from Belgium or the Netherlands, a little bit from the US, a little bit from France, but that's basically it. And I was really surprised. I had no idea that these two tiny little countries we just talked about are more than 60, 65%, 2/3 of the world market. So even in China or in well, Moscow, they don't have them anymore. But you know what I mean? It surprised me. So if we look at Wikipedia and we look for what's the translation of the word French fries, we see that the Icelandics, they have franskar kartofflur, but for the rest, it looks pretty okay. It's just in English where there is a problem. Turkish, patatas kızartması, patatine fritte. It's all quite okay. Even in Russian, kartoffel free. Yeah, so it seems to me that it's just in English. Question, what would they call it in Afrikaans, which is very related to the Flemish language? If anybody knows, I know. Aardappelstafies. Dit was oorspronkelijk een Belgische specialiteit. Potato, yeah, how to call that? And it was originally a Belgian specialty. So, hey, they know in South Africa. But that's also because there's so many of people who live there are from Flemish descent as well. Good. This is what Belgium can say to the world when the world calls it French fries. I would say Belgian fries, my friends. Improve this world. Good. If we go to the country, there is, especially in Brussels, and we know that we're in Brussels. In the sign at the bottom of the slide, you can see there is the lily, which is the symbol of the capital, Brussels. That's a federal capital, and it is like Washington D.C. It is an own regional organization in a way, a gewest it's called in Flemish, that is bilingual. So any official sign or anything needs to be in Flemish or in French. In the moment you go to a municipality just a little bit outside, but this could be part of an ongoing road, the road signs change and they're uniquely Flemish. There is a war going on, a war without bullets, but it's no different. There is a very, very strong focus on keeping these areas as Flemish as possible. And there's all kind of policies in place which are not easy if you're an expat. And Brussels happens to have a lot of expats. So that's, that's something. If we look at the country from economy, we clearly can see it's fairly European, although we also see now that UK and US are there. But on this graph, we can see purple is Europe, and then Asia there's a little bit, the Americas there's a little bit, a bit of Africa and a bit of South America, but clearly they can survive with EU only. That would be enough bread and butter for the folks. It's easier to get there. It's becoming more and more cheap. Although these bus rides are horrendous, I can imagine. But you really are there for less than 10 euros. It's easier to get there. The point is that maybe these days the communication seems to be harder than it was. And the reason why I think is in my generation when I was young, a lot of Flemish people also used to watch Dutch television. And that's definitely over because there is such a multitude of, such an abundance of other channels, regional, local channels now, that this is not happening anymore. It seems to me we're further away than we were at some point. If we look at some of the more challenging elements that the government or the society has, it is number one weakness would be the political and financial tensions between the Flemish and the Walloons. And the Walloons are the French-speaking Belgians. Secondly, as we just saw, 82% of GDP is from Western European economic cycle. But when there was the Euro crisis, that would hurt them way more than it would hurt countries that are a little bit more working with the Far East, etc. There is unemployment, although not that much at the moment, a heavy public debt burden, and the ease of doing business. That ranks 42 out of 188. That is not good for a European modern nation as it is. It hurts innovation, it hurts investment, it hurts collaboration with other economies. So those are the weaknesses, but opposite of that, I would say there is some really strengths. The location. It is really at a wonderful place between UK, Germany, and France, which are still the classic powers on the continent. There is a strong presence of European institutions and a lot of nearby knowledge of how to get finance out of the European funding. The Port of Antwerp is the second busiest in Europe. And actually really close to Rotterdam, which is the busiest one in Europe. The workforce, I should say, they're really well qualified and they're really multilingual. And in the past, there was not so much difference because my parents' generation also had to speak a minimum of 4 languages. But at this moment, very few of you even speak French or German. And that scares me a little bit because the rest of the world is picking up on the English skills. So, yeah, and in Belgium, they still know. Everybody kind of, at least the Flemish side, they speak French and pretty well. I think it's really a good business environment and an excellent business climate rating, A1. And it's also easy to get, they build along the highways much more than they would do in this country. And it's kind of easier to get the permits for that. I would say a very stable, good country, which is enjoyable to be at, particularly when you're a little bit older. I think when you're still on student age, you would maybe appreciate a bit more of the freedom that you would have here and a little bit less social control, because that you would have in Belgium. Now, raw diamonds, before the Second World War, that was in Amsterdam, but now it 100% basically would be Antwerp's. It's just behind the central station, and you actually still see the Hasidian Jewish style with the heads and the 70th century clothing in a way. So it's still very strong and also a financially very powerful part of Antwerp's, where very few people will drive a Mercedes for more historical reasons. So if we look at culture, maybe you could compare that to a tree. And in a tree, you have the branches and the stem, and that's what we see. But what you don't see is the part under the soil. And for a tree, usually it just mirrors itself. In order to get all these branches up, it also needs to be down and to get stability against winds, but certainly also to nurture itself. The tree has the roots, which are almost the same size as the branches we see. And in culture, this would be the same. And so some elements we can see and some we don't. And it's particularly the ones we don't see that are often causing the intercultural conflicts or the cultural crashes and clashes and all that horror that we try to prevent at CCBS GBS. Let's take a look at the scores. The biggest difference would be directness and relationship orientation, and a little bit more short-termism. The rest is not that different, but believe me, for instance, the risk score, yeah, is different. I would say the relationship is where a Dutchie would a little bit offend the Belgian. There's also a little bit more sense of the way it should be, and also a little bit more Burgondic indulgence, enjoying life. And the Dutch way of zo even een broodje, it's not appreciated. They would like to sit down, have a starter, have a main, and have either a strong coffee or a dessert. And they certainly wouldn't say no to a little carafe of wine with the lunch. And the Dutch, plastic cup of buttermilk and kaassoufflé, an apple, and a broodje is not very much appreciated. In fact, you might lose the better contact because it's beyond what people would expect. Also, there's more time necessary for relationship building. It is a little bit on the edge between Latin and Nordic, and Belgium would be really the area where it changes. So historically, yeah, well, you have to see that the Spanish court, also the French have ruled there a long time. The Austrians, this has changed the mindset through traditions that were in place at the time, and that would make it far more Latin than you would expect. So this is in Dutch, but I told you how to translate that, or Google Lens does, or Google Translate now allows images. It translates really the Dutch thick necks with big mouths, and that is an expression, dikke nekken met grote bekken. They tend to feel that the Dutch are arrogant and they talk a lot. And they're really bothered by it. And the thing is that most Dutchies wouldn't even realize that they are giving that impression. Because normally when people work together in an international setting, I think both sides want to make it work and try to give their most positive side. That doesn't always work. You have to realize that people in Belgium had to go to school in a uniform. This is blue and white, which is conventional schools. The Catholics have the gray and white, and the Protestants the green and white. And there's also for other religions there might be private schools, but I don't know about the colors. I think it's just maybe an own uniform, but it's quite normal to be in a uniform. And yeah, it would be a bit like Britain or so many countries in the world, but in Belgium it's rather strict. You're not also expected to come with a perm in the hair, strong lipstick, metal things in your face are certainly not appreciated, and they will send you home. And there is not too much talking by the students. So what I often see is when I have international collaboration and there's Dutch colleagues that also will talk, they want to ask questions, but it remains awfully silent because people hesitate. They're more shy in that sense, and also don't really appreciate people that are not shy. So that is one thing that explains it. The other one would be, and again, this is Dutch because it is Dutch, onrechtstreeks. This is in the Van Dalen dictionaries. For those of you not speaking Dutch, the best dictionaries are Van Dalen. They are amazing and like that. And you can also find them on the internet. This means indirectly. So not straight in a way, but it says in Belgium. So this is a word in the Netherlands we don't even have. And that exactly shows the cultural problem that arises in these contexts. Belgians are far more indirect, and the word onrechtstreeks is very Flemish. A North Netherlander, you say what you think, and we don't hold back. Just the mouth starts talking, even without thinking before you start talking. I think that is one thing that irritates people. Because you have also cultures where you first need to think a little bit before you express yourself, like Finland, like Japan, but also in Belgium it's a little bit more like that. they are also a little bit surprised by the openness, or sometimes also explained as naive, because in the Netherlands it's quite okay to express that you failed. I wouldn't do it in France, and let's say Belgium is in the beginning. What also surprises people is that everybody talks. So also the secretary has an opinion, and I can imagine that for the Belgian delegation, it would be more the seniors that do the talking, not the guy doing the work placement, the stagiaire. Good. Yeah, it's not important, but I noticed that Besançon in the east of France, it has the same flag as Belgium. I have another two quotes because it's always nice to see what great minds have to say. And Geert van Istendaal, known by good books on the Belgian mindset or spirit. The Belgian Labyrinth is one of his bestsellers. He says that Belgium is the best remedy against patriotism, because patriots are that it doesn't work. You're either Flemish or Walloon, or you're from the German-speaking smaller area. And then Nicolas Royal, who lived in Antwerp, he's from Britain, and he says Belgium is a country with a split personality. Yeah, not that the UK is so uniform, though, Mr. Royal. This is something I made myself, and I'm not proud of it when I'm in Belgium. But since I'm not there now, I'm very proud of this picture because, it is kind of funny. It's, of course, not true, but in a way it is. And that is food for debate. De geschiedenis van België. If we look at the history of Belgium, it was the Netherlands, but due to losing some wars, the Spanish court stayed, and Philips II, they were actually born in Gand. So that's where they had court, and so there was the Spanish king that ruled over a lot of continents, but actually lived in Belgium, but which was called Spain at the time. But the flag on the left is the Flemish flag. The flag on the right is the Walloon flag. So one is the black lion, the other has the red rooster, and they are completely in their own comparted subculture and try to do as little as possible with them. And there is mobs and fighting, and it's interesting. Breaking up, the end of Belgium. And what would it mean to the European nation? This was Time magazine. The thing is, it could happen, and these things happen when there's a shortage of bread or so. The Arab Spring or whatever is usually about food. The moment that would happen, and there are arms available, I say that we will have a Flemish Republic, and maybe we get, a Brussels District of Columbia, such a solution, a federal European capital. We'll see. But when I say this to Belgian people, a lot of people also say, no, impossible. So don't count on it. It is complex, though, and it is. We often say that the Belgians are the world champions of the compromise. Now let's take a look, because you see the compromise in the institutional structure and the very multiple administrative levels, which are not easy to understand. Let's try, though. This is, and you really need to pay attention, because this just might be an exam question. I don't know if it comes in your exam, but if, then it definitely will about this. And we could ask, like, for instance, how many parliaments does the country have? And then you need to understand how it works. The dark green part is the German language area. These are originally German grounds that got confiscated after the German Reich lost the First World War, and mostly they took them because there were mines with then valuable metals, but nowadays it just makes them obliged to translate everything to German, which is good for export, but still a hassle. It's 71,000 people, so it's not a lot, and there's a special governor for it. This part is Wallonie, the French-speaking part of Belgium. This part is the Flemish part of Belgium. Check out this little pocket there, and there the Voerstreek. And then this is the bilingual area for Brussels capital, or the federal capital. And that is the language. Then that translates into three communities. The communauté. This is the Flemish community. This is the French-speaking community, including capital Brussels, and this is the German community. But that's just a community. So that would be related to the language. And here we see the geographical areas. And that's called in Dutch gewest. So we have the Walloons, we have the Flemish, and we have Brussels. And the Walloons also absorb the German speaking, because it's too small to have, separate. It's just too much hassle for them. Now, what we see is that the Flemish, they said, this is ridiculous. We will put our community and our area together in one parliament. That is a beautiful, shiny building in the Wetstraat, Rue de la Loi, in Brussels. So that's their separate thing. But there are two parliaments for the French-speaking. Then there is a special council for the German-speaking and the Brussels, the capital, the bilingual one. And of course, there is the federal government. So you have many prime ministers. For the French one, you have two. For the Flemish one, you just have one. But this is minister-president. But it's only for this area. And this one, don't forget that one. There's a lot of fighting over it. And then also you have the federal, for the overall things, and foreign affairs and army and signing contracts on behalf of Belgium. So it's difficult. So a lot of stuff is actually done between the Netherlands and Flanders. That is most of our collaboration, and it's not always federal. So it's very mixed and complex. Another one, if there is an official federal governmental body, they want to protect the linguistic minorities, or so for anything administrative, there is the so-called Andreas cross. You might know it from the flag of Scotland, or the coat of arms of Amsterdam with the 3 Andreas crosses in it. So what it means is that if the top person is speaking Flemish, the second in command always must be French speaking, and vice versa. And this is called after St. Andrew, the Andrieskruis. They don't want to call it Andreaskruis because that's too French and too Latin. So it's called Andrieskruis. There's a strong purity on language. We'll get to talk about that later. And why? Because the apostle St. Andrew got crucified like that, and not like the good Lord Jesus on a cross like that, but on a cross like that. And that's also what Amsterdam has, or Amstelveen. They have the 3 Andreas crosses. And this is the public body, federal public body, which is the Andreas cross. And if the CEO is Flemish, the vice president always will be a French-speaking Belgian, vice versa. And then they also have to protect it. The chairman of the board of directors will be French, so that there's always on the same level some counterbalance of the other language. This is a fight you cannot believe. If you have more time, you could dive into it in YouTube or some serious literature, because that is just amazing that such a modern country can survive despite all these crazy solutions. Like I said, the world champions of compromise. Yeah, and then if it changes the next year, it must be another one. There's also the future and the past. This is the reality where we see Di Lupo for the Walloons, socialist, and Bart de Wever when he still had his belly, who's now mayor of Antwerp. And I love this picture because it so much represents what Belgium basically is. It is fighting without guns. Whenever there were sports things, I never really understood what this yellow flag was. I thought it was a sponsor or something. But actually, it is the Flemish flag. Vlaanderen die leeuw. Flanders the lion. Should you do this? Yeah, you should. And I thought it enjoy Belgian weather. Yeah. This I also like. I'm very proud of this. I did this from the Gamma. Yeah, it is changing after every election. We see that more from the federal is taken away to the regions, and you have to see that there is fighting. Who is in charge of the police? Who gets this money? Who gets this tax? And it seems that every time there is a lot of trouble about getting a new cabinet formed, a new group of ministers, but usually it's about giving away powers to the regions and taking it from federal united Belgium. So this is a process that seems to be ongoing from my perspective. Let's talk about language, because it is all about language, this whole problem, I would say. Sometimes it's difficult to understand because they have these NV and BVBA, but if the company has SA or SPRL, then you know it's a French-speaking company, and if it's NV, and in Dutch we call it BV, but actually it's legally better to call it BVBA, besloten vennootschap 1P met beperkte aansprakelijkheid. Good. If we look at the amount of people speaking it, the Flemish is stronger. Also economically, it's much stronger. 60% French speaking, 40% German, 1%. This doesn't add up. I don't know. I guess I was lazy, or it's just behind the comma. It's a little bit less. If we see signs on the road like this, wegomlegging, deviation, you might think that this is crazy because it's the same, but actually it's very practical, because if you turn to the right, you will get all your signage in Dutch, and if you turn to the left, it will be French. So it makes perfectly sense. The problem is we just don't always understand it because we don't come from that background. Because it needs to be Flemish, people really want pure Flemish, and the Dutch that we speak in the Netherlands is loaded with Latin and English, even Malay. We have all kind of influences, but the Flemish like to keep it pure, like the South Africans or the Finnish or and the Mussolini in Italy. I don't want to compare any of these. Voorbehouden, because gereserveerd would be a Latin source. No thanks. Let's use Dutch words. So that in that sense, it's maybe more Dutch than the Netherlands. Some other ones: krieken for kersen, hespen for a kind of ham. And we feel it might be chic to use a French word, not in Flanders. It's not only Flemish. There's definitely also the Walloon, and I bought the Dictionnaire de Belgicisme and the other booklet called 200 Belgicismes, 2000 Belgicisms, and these are words that are French words, but really predominantly used in Belgium or with a particular meaning in Belgian French. So bear in mind that there is differences, like, and sometimes they seem to be slightly more logical. It's like, what would be 70 in French? 70, whereas the Belgians would say 70, and 90 for 90, for 2010, the French say, and I think the Belgians have a point.
25 euro.
Yeah, this is a little sound clip that I copied, but the point is that there is very strong fighting to keep Flemish and to keep French. French seems to be slightly expanding, and the Flemish are scared to death that they are, because actually also cities that before were Flemish, like Lille, called Rijssel in Flemish, and there's a lot of, and now they also seem to be losing Brussels, and they think like, where is Flanders going? Well, I don't know, but the United Nations said that maybe some of the language requirements that municipalities ask are too strict. Friends of mine was a guy from India married to a Turkish lady. They have a child, and since they bought a beautiful house close to the airport in Brussels, they all had to speak Dutch, and they had to send her to a Dutch-speaking school. And they were like, no way, we don't speak that at home. It's a kind of international English. And if I would speak a language, I would take French, but they didn't allow it. And in the end, they sold the house simply because it was too tough to have that going. Here you hear a sound recording where a guy who always has been speaking French in his municipality and he needs a new driver's license. They are refusing to speak French to them because they have new regulation that they're not allowed to speak anything but Dutch. And here you go.
€25. 25 euro.
Ça veut dire français pour français?
Nee, ik moet Nederlands spreken. €25.
20 euro.
25.
Anyway, it goes on and on. And the sad thing is that the guy doesn't understand. He needs to pay 25 euros and he doesn't understand because he doesn't speak Dutch. And the guy just keeps on yelling in Flemish, 25 euro. Okay, some bloopers. Language. I think if you're an English speaker, this is rather funny. Godot has big nuts. And that's wonderful. I guess if you're an elephant, you have. Sorry, forgot that. The Dutch brain, the Belgian brain. And here you see some of those, but you can make a print screen. And then Google Translate will do the job. It is speaking versus listening. It is transparency or have confidence versus shy. It's consensus versus a little bit more hierarchy. It's not to show what you are thinking, whereas the Dutch immediately, throw it at you, whether it's good or bad. And so there is differences, and the Dutch give trust. The Belgians want to earn trust, and there is all these cultural habits that are absolutely different. And that is the Spanish court influence. I don't know, the French influence, but it's not the same. It is different. The family names might really differ. In Dutch, Jan de Cler would always be under the C, whereas in Belgium, we would say Jan de Cler as one name. So what is it? And that is at times a little bit difficult. The Flemish call the Dutchies like the Germans, too documented, too many standard procedures. I'm sure my German students wouldn't agree. The Dutch don't like improvisation, and they like, rigid protocol organization beforehand, whereas the Flemish are a little bit waiting what's happening and then they steer. They're, like I told you, a master in compromise, and that is the reality of life.
Ga je mee naar Nederland? Ga je mee naar Nederland?
Yeah, where can we find it in the Netherlands? Very close to Dam Square, actually. It's het Vlaams Cultuurhuis, de Brakke Grond, Flemish Cultural House. That's where they serve decent Flemish food, Flemish classics, and also the beverages go with it. And there's occasionally writers or movie or art. Flanders is very nearby also, as is Wallonie and Brussels. Here we have the Haram drinking house, the Zotte, where you can find, if you speak Dutch, it's funny, a beer called Kwak. Yeah. I hope that this short 55 minutes was able to spread some light on the planet Belgium. I hope that you have found some inspiration, and who knows, maybe you'll enjoy the capital of Europe. You shouldn't say that to people from Strasbourg, but it is, in my opinion. And you can see Mannekepis. Is it expensive to get there? No, not at all. If you take a train, it's less than 2 hours, and you pay 25 euros. And if you go to Sloterdijk or to, another one, it's a little less than 3 hours. And it's 9 euros. Can you imagine? But then you have to sit in one of those kettle buses. Good luck, but there's no excuse why you shouldn't go. You spend more money in Zara, and you guys should travel. Experience the culture clash that you will find trying to speak Dutch in an area. They'll answer you in French or in English. I think, having all said that, my time is up. I thank you dearly for joining me on my trip to the southern neighbors, which I hope that you will be inspired to go tonight still. Thanks very much, folks, and it was lovely to have you all aboard.
Thank you.